You've got some absolute zinger stats to impress everyone.
I think that's another big decision for Amorim today, because what that could mean is a new position for Brighton and Mbeumo. Their fast starts, United, are really causing people problems. They're going at teams from the start.
Dino, you're very much an advocate.
That's very good. That's nice. Yeah. You should do this for a living.
Exactly, yeah. Manchester United are just 3 wins away from forcing Frank from the United Strand to shave off all of his hair. But Brighton come to Old Trafford on Saturday night and they are an imperious opponent for United. The Seagulls have not lost in their last 5 and they've won on each of their last 3 visits to Old Trafford. But of course the Reds are flying high from that win at Liverpool last weekend. I'm Will Pugh, that is Sun Sports Tactical Guru Dean Scoggins. This is the Tactics Exposed Team Talk studio. And Dino, as always, we will be answering questions from the Tactics Exposed viewers ahead of what promises to be a very intriguing game.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to apologise to Arsenal fans and Chelsea fans who are demanding we go back onto them on Team Talk. But this is a really interesting game because of that stat you mentioned about Hertzler and Brighton going there and just winning. So
exactly.
Fantastic.
Exactly that, mate. Yeah, Man Utd very much flavour of the week at the moment, aren't they? But thanks to everyone who's watched our last couple of United episodes and got stuck in the comments. And Dino's getting an awful lot of praise, which I'm not sure that I'm that much of a fan of. Dino, let's go straight in to question number 1, mate. Will Ruben Amorim play a striker versus Brighton? In the Team Talk episode, in the build-up to the game at Liverpool, you said Šeško could be the man to occupy the 2 defenders. You were very impressed with Amorim's decision not to play him at all and in fact play Mason Mount and then just say, don't worry, we're not going to occupy you with anyone at all. Do you think he'll employ the same strategy this time round?
Yeah, it's a very, very good question. So when you buy someone like Šeško for that amount of money, there's a management thing that's got to go on here as well, right? You've stuck him on the bench at Anfield and it worked. Then you've got a home game. You'd expect your big striker to come back in, but actually didn't the front 3 look a lot better and more mobile without him in it? So it's a very, very difficult decision. And one of the reasons it's a difficult decision is because who they're playing against in Brighton. So the 2 centre-backs for Brighton in Van Heck and Dunk are very, very dominant in aerial positions. Quite. So therefore, you would say that there are, 2 sides to that coin. Do you play your big number 9 to compete against them, or do you say, no, we're not going to win that battle, so therefore we don't? So if we just go straight into the board, what I think will probably happen is he'll stick with the same front 3, which is Mount, which is Cunha, and then Mbeumo. Okay, but the key to this is going to be who they play as the wing-backs in this game, because that will dictate the positions that these guys take up. If they play Amad Diallo again at right wing-back, which I was a big believer in for Anfield, then Amad Diallo is going to get into this position here, which means Mbeumo and Cunha are going to act much more like 2 strikers. Mason Mount can float around. Bruno Fernandes is going to get up there and join the attack. And Dorgu or Dalot, perhaps, are going to be the one that either has to help in defence or bombs up the outside. So it is a difficult decision. The reason that I think he'll stick with the same front 3 is because what he will fancy happening is that Cunha can move this back 4 around. So if Mason Mount, as being Ruben Amorim's favourite, plays on the left of the 3 and he comes into this position here, Cunha can go out, dragging centre-halves apart, which allows Mbeumo to run through because we know Amad Diallo is going to come from this side. The argument for playing Šeško is that you get the centre-backs together in that position, Šeško occupies there, and then if you do leave out Mason Mount, you have Cunha running in that gap and then Brian Mbeumo running in that gap there, either side of him. So there's 2 sides to that coin. Personally, I think he'll stick with the same front 3 and then he has the option to bring Šeško on later on.
Dino, you're very much an advocate.
That's very good. That's nice. Yeah. You should do this for a living.
Exactly. Yeah. You have been for quite some time as well. From basically when Ruben Amorim first came in, I think it was before Ipswich was his first ever game, and I remember you saying then, he is going to be a big part of this team, Amad, under the system that Amorim plays. It hasn't really come to fruition as much as I certainly think you'd have liked to have seen, but it certainly paid dividends last weekend. Are you very much wed to him playing the fullback position at all times, or do you think he could be utilised elsewhere?
I think that's another big decision for Amorim today, because what that could mean is a new position for Brighton and Mbeumo.
Okay.
And I don't just mean perhaps a starting position, but the positions he takes up in the game. There's a possibility here that Amad Diallo plays in the front three. Amorim could go with Cunha and Mbeumo and Amad Diallo as a front three.
And Mbeumo through the middle?
Yeah, he could. I think he could do that. He played there for Brentford a couple of times. And again, that's from a mobility point of view. So again, I think it's perhaps unlikely because of how much he favours Mason Mount. But one thing we've got to be aware of, again, when you play Brighton, is that Brighton will leave 3 up. So if Matoma's fit, there's Minter, there's Welbeck, there's Ruter. They will leave 3 up. So in which sense, if United just play with their bombing on wing-backs, and let's just say that, Bruno and Casemiro are in there, and then Amad Diallo plays wing-back and moves up to here, you end up with a back three like this, and you can see straight away these areas that are going to be attacked by Brighton. Okay?
And of course, Dino, against Manchester City and Tottenham, Brighton scored and had employed that tactic to huge effect.
Yeah, exactly that. So if he wants to keep Amad Diallo as part of the 11, one of the ways to do that is that your right centre-back comes across in here, Dorgu or Dalot convert it into a back 4, Amad Diallo plays on the right of the front 3, and then you end up with Mbeumo and Cunha in those attacking positions there.
Just for a bit of clarity here, though, Dino, when you've got the 4 at the back there, that's the position United will shift into when the left fullback is attacking.
Yes.
And then if whoever it might say, it's Darlow at right wing back, if he attacks this side, then the left fullback drops back to make it that 4?
Yeah, technically, yes. And then, so therefore, it's then a decision over, do you want Amad Diallo's pace, or do you want Mason Mount's trickery and positional sense in those two things? And look, that's a big decision for him to make. But the reason I think that Brian and Mbeumo could occupy that 9 position is because when United do go direct, he's unbelievably good at picking up those second balls. And for his size, he's very good in the air as well. So if they do clear their lines from Lamans and go up to Brian and Mbeumo, he can buzz around. And then also, we're going to come on to this more in a second, but we've talked about that becoming a 4-4-2. If then that is Amad Diallo there, he drops in, so you've got 4 there, and then Cunha and Mbeumo effectively form a front 2. So, and we saw their link up in the game at Anfield. They're getting more and more in tune with each other. And if Cunha drops in to come and receive the ball with the midfield players in this position here, dropping into that space to make a 3, and Mbeumo can go that way from a centre-forward position and that way. So it's almost like double threat from Bruno there. From Brian and Mbeumo there. And it means that it makes that mobile front 3 more flexible. And I think if you play with Šeško in the middle, then you know that as a defensive unit, Šeško is going to stay in the middle and you're going to be defending Cunha one side and Brian and Mbeumo the other. If you go with a front 3 of Mbeumo, Cunha, and then either Mount or Amad Diallo, you could end up in a situation where they're in different positions at different times, which makes them more unpredictable.
So back to the question then, Dino. Would I play with a striker, yes or no?
Well, they will play with a striker, but I don't think they'll play with the striker that the question is asking. I think Šeško will come from the bench.
Excellent. OK, let's move on then, Dino, to question number 2. Can Manchester United win if Brighton let them have all of the possession? Now, this is an extremely interesting topic. You've got some absolute zinger stats to impress everyone with.
Yeah, it is amazing, and I think we'll show these on the screen, but United basically win when they don't have the ball and lose when they do have the ball. So it was a really interesting comment, and thanks again for the comments in the videos that we've done, about how, United beat Sunderland with possession. They didn't really. They had 50% of the possession against Sunderland at home.
Which is effectively conceding possession.
It is. And if you go back and watch the Sunderland game, you don't have to, I've done that for you.
Go back and watch the episode of Tactics.
Is that basically what's happened is that United there have tried to give Sunderland the ball as much as possible. Yeah. They're bound to have quite a lot of the ball when they attack against a team like Sunderland at Old Trafford. But when they lost to Manchester City United, they had more of the ball. When they lost to Arsenal, they had more of the ball. ball. They drew at Fulham with about 50% possession as well. And then the games that they've won at Anfield, and then the last Chelsea. Against Chelsea, they were playing against 10 men, and they still had less possession. So what's the possession is only 9/10 of the law. And, you know, as a big David Moyes fan that you are, you weren't used to teams having any of the ball anyway, were you? But no, so let's explain this. So Brighton are a really, really interesting team. And Fabian Hertzler has some wild and wacky ideas sometimes where, I'll just show this quickly on the board, that sometimes Brighton will do this and they'll go with a front four. They'll move into almost a back five where Baleba will drop in and they'll just have one person in midfield. So they'll do like that Newcastle style thing we've talked about before. Yep. Well, they'll completely open up the midfield area. And what that then means is teams are more likely to go, oh, I can press on here and I can press on there because, look, I've got nobody to mark. And then they win the ball in transition and then they hit you in here. So what Brighton will want to happen is United to push into that 3-2-5 attacking shape. Do you remember the Man City game where Man United lost possession here? Luke Shaw and Harry Maguire had a bit of a meltdown together with a horrible pass from Ugarte, and then Bernardo Silva released Erling Haaland into that space who had half the field to run into. Just a Brighton example of that. Brighton did this against Manchester City as well.
And Tottenham?
And Tottenham, where they go into that position there, they win the ball in here, and then they don't even look. Just hit it into that space.
Because they know where the space is going to be.
Or they get a winger come into that position there to collect the ball and then run. And then obviously the defenders are going back the way they don't want to go. And then you end up with this 4v3 going the other way. So that's what Brighton will try and do, which is when United have got possession. So I almost...
So like set traps for them, try and lure them in and then bosh, go.
Exactly that. And I feel like it could end up, and not that this, I don't think this will happen the whole game, but it could end up with, no, you have the ball. No, you have the ball. No, you have the ball from the goalkeepers.
Well, Dino, I mean, you're sort of joking about how much of a David Moyes advocate I was. 30% possession, 3 points was the sort of football I was used to watching for 3 years. Sean Dyche has come in. He was talking, as Nottingham Forest manager, in one of his first press conferences, saying set pieces and long throws are back in vogue now. Football's just a cyclical thing. It very much feels like no one wants the ball in the Premier League anymore.
Yeah, it does feel like that. And the one team that I watch a lot every week in Tottenham have a lot of the ball and not a lot of success in breaking teams down at the moment. And that's another example of it. So I think it could almost become, you know, that game of chicken between the two things about how long can we let you have the ball before we pounce on top of it. And Brighton, again, I just find them very interesting because if United do drop into their back five shape, let's just move them into there for a second, where against Liverpool, they were very, very effective in that 4-5-1, okay? That's the defensive shape we saw Manchester United in.
The 5-4-1?
Yeah, 5-4-1,
cool.
Sorry, in that shape. So we move the Brighton front three, they will retain the width. They will stay very, very wide. So then they'll have their centre midfielders come in and Baleba will sit behind play, okay? So then if Brighton end up in that position there, then United will think, this is great. Because that's then when Brian Mbeumo or Amad Diallo, there, thank you very much. You know, perhaps not Mason Mount, he comes in here, but Cunha then goes, great, I'm going to go over there into that space that's gone in behind. And then I'm not going to flip the whole board because that would be too different, but you can see exactly what I mean. If that was the other way round, then Manchester United are going to be targeting those areas. So, but the other interesting thing about Brighton is that if a team against them has the ball in these positions, they are brave in the press. So when they lose, it's almost a Jurgen Klopp style. You've got 7 to 9 seconds to win the ball back, and if you don't win it back in that time, back you go, get back into position. So I think it's going to be a really, really interesting tactical battle. And can one of them, it will be Brian Mbeumo for Man United, it will be either Matoma or Minter for Brighton, be the cheat code player where, right, we're back in shape, let's just creep up here and leave that man there and just be in that position where he can get away in that position. So a little bit of we call it cheating, right? It's not cheating, but it's cheating the tactics by... You used to think it was lazy, right, when you played Sunday League. But now these players are doing that on purpose. And can Brian Mbeumo get in that position or Amad Diallo from a wide position to cheat that Brighton back four?
Well, Man United fans, Dino, of course, will be desperate for Kara Matoma to not be fit for this game. Still some doubts at the moment. Seagulls fans will have their fingers crossed, of course. One thing I do just really quickly want to ask you, Dino, before we move on to question number 3, how difficult is it, or how brave is it, for Ruben Amorim to implement a tactical approach that you're saying, which is the Manchester United manager at Old Trafford against, and I mean this respectfully, a team like Brighton, to say, no, we don't want to have the ball? Surely the Old Trafford crowd, they're not used to that sort of thing. Is it bold, or is it
Well, the
foolish?
first thing I'd do from a PR perspective is make sure that they put the possession stats in the match day programme before the game starts.
On the front cover.
Yeah. Like, remember, lads, this is why we're doing this. But like, I don't think Ruben Amorim will care. Like, we've seen that already. I mean, for months, people have been criticising the 3-4-3. Not me, I hasten to add. It's about adaptation in a 3-4-3 that he needs to work on. But he's not for changing. He's not going to be bothered by that exercise. And as I say, as I showed on Tactics Exposed previously, they're not just playing 3-4-3. They will swing into that 4-4-2 shape.
I mean, more
when
the possession
they need
thing
to.
as well, though,
Yeah,
right?
but as I say, he's not going to be bothered. If he sees that that's the way we're going to hurt Brighton, that's what he'll do.
Will United fans have it?
Well, it depends on 3 points, doesn't it?
And if they're not coming in the bottom quarter of the table again this season, I suppose
absolutely. They
they'll
could go
accept
back in the top 5 this weekend.
Absolutely. Right, let's move on, Dino, to question number 3. Are Manchester United a long ball team now? Well, that is not a bad question at all. I know we've sort of covered it a little bit, but that is exactly the success that they had against Liverpool, particularly with Senny Lamens, as we've discussed. Yes or no then, Dino?
Well, they have been so far this season. I mean, even before the upturn in results we saw in the Arsenal game, we saw them attack very, very direct. And until Brian Mbeumo had scored his first goal for United, he'd had the most shots from direct attacks without scoring. So obviously now he's got a couple of goals to his name. Their fast starts, United, are really causing people problems. They're going at teams from the start. And also, hasten to add, Brian Mbeumo used to do this for Brentford.
Well, that's what they were doing last season.
Yeah, he used
loads,
to
wasn't
go
it?
for teams right from the start. And, you know, we've seen loads of weird kickoffs lately with balls being booted up in the air or out for throw-ins and stuff. And that's just for teams just to go, just calm down, everyone. But United have been very good at that from the start. And it's because they've been direct, long ball, if you like, and put those teams under pressure straight away. But it's also been the opposition they've played so far. Look, Van Dijk and Konate were shown that was not what they wanted.
Right.
Arne Slot's been talking about it all week. He was even talking about it after the Champions League game of, it's because we can't press when the ball's in the air. Well, get used to it, Liverpool, because that's what everybody's going to do to you this year. So, and then
God forbid teams try and beat you.
Absolutely, and Liverpool and United did it against Arsenal as well. You know, and they didn't have a great deal of success, but that's because Saliba's not as good under the high ball as he is in the ball in the ground as well. So they've chosen their opposition, Man United, of how they do it. So this game, I actually would like to see Lamens with the ball on his feet a little bit more.
Okay.
Do you remember when we spoke about Lamens when he signed? I said he's very, very confident on the ball, as we've seen so far. He likes to put his foot on the ball. He likes to roll the ball around. But so far, it's gone long. But what I think Brighton will do is actually stand off. They'll actually go, we're going to win the long ball with Van Heck and Dunk. So if you go long, and then we're backing Belieber and Gomez and the Hinchelwood to win the second balls in that midfield battle. So I don't think if Lamens has the ball, we're going to see Danny Welbeck press here. I don't think we're going to see the wingers press here. But that might mean that United try and bait them, try and bring them on. And as we've seen, so let me just move them back into the 3-4-3 shape again, which is the starting position for United. What I think we might see is De Ligt go back to centre-back position again. Then you have Lenny Yoro here and Luke Shaw here. And then what they've done is they have Casemiro and De Ligt go like that and Bruno Fernandes go like that. Okay. So that's a playing out shape. And if Lamens is confident enough to do this and bait Brighton on, if then Welbeck does go, there's a ball here, there's a ball there, they press on there, there's a bounce pass in there to play out, and the wing-backs will come involved. And naturally what happens if your team presses is the game becomes condensed this way, which then means there's your ball over the top for your attack. So They have been a long ball team so far, but how brave can they be against a very, very brave Brighton team to suck them on, to give them the joy in behind? So I think from both teams, we're going to see a bit of a mixture of tactics here. And as the game goes on and the game opens up, I think we'll see more passing through the passing lanes than we will at the beginning.
I think it's quite interesting, Dino, to think, because if that system there that you've just described relies on Brighton pressing, I suppose. Brighton also, away from home in particular, you've got a lot more freedom because the fans aren't on your back to press or shut down, to just go, no, you have the ball there. You keep it in the non-danger zone.
Exactly.
We'll win it where it gets dangerous. I think it's extremely intriguing.
And the other thing that we could see, because Hertzler does like to throw curveballs in the way they play, in the tactics, and throw a surprise, in that exact setup there, we could see him go, no, go on, lads. We fancy you to win the ball back up there against United. So then go there, and then let's just mark them man v man back here. And look, straight away, you'll see there's a spare man because Welbeck has pressed on. But if Lamans is hitting the ball long, that's where then you come across into that shape there, and you can shuffle around while the ball's in the air, which enables that player to get back, and then you're back in your 4-5-1 shape.
So just quickly then, Dino, if, as you have sort of predicted, I suppose, that Amorim doesn't play Šeško again and that he comes off the bench, what you've described is that United can actually still play a direct style without Šeško, but then how will that change if they continue to play long ball? How will it look differently when or if Šeško comes on?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a good part of it as well, because I think he will come from the bench. Like, winning or losing, he'll come from the bench, because if you're winning the game, you'd think, right, well, we'll revert to almost 2 up. And then if he wins the header, you get the Mbeumo running behind, which is how they got such success against Chelsea. But the way they'll change it when he comes on is that they don't necessarily just go from keeper to Šeško in that sense. What they'll do is they'll try and manipulate a triangle out wide. So either one here or one here, where the ball goes out and then it goes in there, and from here the long ball goes. But if then he drops into there, from there the long ball goes, because you create much more of an angle for either a player to run in behind there from a flick on, or a player for running there from a forward pass. And because from a goalkeeping position, it's really just a heading match there between the centre half. So they will adapt how they play out if Šeško's on the field.
Absolutely. Don't forget, Dino, of course, with Betfair Safe Sub, your bet is not over yet. If your player that you have backed gets subbed off, it rolls on to the player coming on. So if you've had Mbeumo to score first, the scores are at 0-0, he gets hauled off and Šeško comes on in his place and nods one in at the back post, you still get paid out. Dino, Manchester United versus Brighton, 9th versus 10th. Huge stakes for Man United. A real bit of momentum, it feels, building behind the club now. Do you fancy them for this one?
I do actually, yeah. And I mean, I'm always one for records, and not many teams go to Man United and win 4 in a row, do they? But 9th v 10th doesn't do this justice, does it? This is the most exciting game of the weekend.